And welcome to episode 4 of Logic and Reason. Tonight we will be discussing the conspiracy claim that space is fake. This will be a mini-series, and the first battle we will be fighting is the conspiracy claim that tries to deny space by claiming that rockets do not work in a vacuum. I am your co-host, Logical Troglodyte. Alongside of me, Jeff from Steaming Cup of Reason. Jeff, say hi to everybody.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Logic and Reasons. Jeff, Steaming Cup of Reason here. I'm really happy to be here. It's going to be a great show, and I'd like to introduce our first champion of the evening. It's YouTube's favorite rocket man, Mr. Red's Rhetoric. Say hello, Red.
Hello, and thanks for having me. Thank you for having such poor standards.
No poor standards.
And joining us from our previous episode, BlueMarbleScience. Blue, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. How's it going tonight? And again, thanks for having me on.
Hey, glad you came back. And joining us once again as our chief mod to keep everything all on the up and up, Amy Hogan.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope you all are enjoying your day, whatever time of day it is, and thank you for coming.
And just a little bit of housekeeping since we're talking to the chief mod. Mods that are in the live chat, if we get conspiracy theorists in the room, that's fine. Let them talk unless they're being racist, sexually explicit, homophobic, or any of that other bullshit nonsense. That stuff's got to go. But if they're asking questions and that is relevant to the topic, we will probably address them. And working in the background is our executive producer, Dick Dawson.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me on again. This is going to be a really, really good one. I can tell. Can't wait.
And Taddy Boggle is the gentleman that's working our dials and bells to keep everything streaming properly. Taddy, say hi to the crowd.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Enjoy the show, folks.
All right, so let's jump right on in. The conspiracy theorists are trying to claim that rockets don't work in a vacuum. I have a bet we can debunk this in 30 seconds or less and call it a night. Reds, what do you got to say?
Explosions still work in space, and that's all a rocket is just controlled explosion. I mean, do these dumbasses really think that explosions don't work in space? Like, seriously? How did they make that work in their head?
Your guess is good as mine. Blue, you got any opening volleys you want to fire at this conspiracy claim?
I think I'm about as confused as Riz is. How in the hell can you believe that an explosion can occur in space? It makes no sense.
Yeah,
Not at all.
Since we're talking about rockets being a controlled explosion, we may as well lead into the basics of how rockets work. I haven't had a physics class since 1982. I've played with model rockets. I know the basic basis of rocketry, but I'm going to let the engineers in the room address this a little deeper.
Oh boy. Something. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Basically, if you spew shit out the nozzle, it's going to push you in the exact opposite direction. The faster it leaves the nozzle, the faster you go in the other direction. It's quite simple. No atmosphere needed. So what they do is that they have this thing. It's called fuel. And this fuel goes inside of a chamber where it explodes and shit, and then that explosion fires gases out the ass end at about, I don't know, Mach 5 or some shit like that, which pushes the rocket in the exact opposite direction. Rocketry 101.
Yep. And I do remember back in high school, we were discussing Newton's laws of motion. And to demonstrate that third law of motion, we took a skateboard to the gymnasium, nice waxed wooden floor, and we started throwing balls of different sizes and weights across the gymnasium. And lo and behold, the action of throwing the ball pushed us on the skateboard backwards. Amazing. And if we threw enough balls fast enough, we could actually scoot all the way across the gym.
Yep, correct. It's the same exact principle. Nothing's different. And also, that would be the exact same thing if you were in a spacesuit and in a vacuum chamber. You threw those like a medicine ball and you're sitting on a skateboard. You threw that away from you. And the very moment the medicine ball leaves you and the system that is you and the skateboard, you will move backwards.
Exactly. Yeah. It has nothing to do with the atmosphere. Not at all.
Yeah. Do they really want to claim that the medicine ball is pushing against the air and that's what's moving you?
And that's, I think, where the main confusion is with a lot of these conspiratards. They seem to be under the impression that rockets can't work in space because there's nothing to push off of. Well, there's no need for it. That's not how a rocket engine works.
Yeah, no, that's not how any of this works. You're right that this can be debunked in about 30 seconds, but I'm going to try and stretch this out for as long as possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can keep everybody up till midnight, 1 a.m. In North America and all that, so we may as well give them something to chew on here.
Well,
Yeah,
Riz,
exactly.
Riz, I want to. I think one thing that they some of them at least seem to be terribly confused over is how the rocket fuel burns when there's no air around, and we should probably tell them the sad facts of life, and that is we take the oxygen with us.
Yeah. So you need fuel, heat, and oxygen. Rockets have their own oxygen supply, no air needed. So deal with it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Even solid rocket fuel has its own oxidizer built in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
so
Works exactly the way the fuse on an M80 would work. If you throw it in the lake, the damn thing will still explode. It doesn't need to be burning in air. It has everything it needs right there.
Yep. Once you have a source of ignition, fuel, and an oxidizer, it's all just a matter of focusing that energy in a certain direction so that you have an equal and opposite force, and then it pushes the rocket up. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And before we got on the air, Reds, you were telling us in the background a little bit about the heat in the metals and the speed, escape velocity, and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to make sure we address some of that here while we're live.
Well, one of the issues that I have been informed of is that rocket engines operate at a certain temperature. And that temperature is well past the melting point of every metal, especially the metal that rocket engines are made out of. So the question is, if rocket engines operate at such a phenomenal temperature, how can they keep themselves together without melting from the inside out? And based on this, it's just simple math. Hey, you have a melting point here. Rocket engine is this temperature here. Therefore, rockets are fake. This is all CGI and not real because impossibility. The thing is that a rocket engine bell, the actual bell of the engine, is not a solid piece of metal. I encourage anyone and everyone to go to the Kennedy Space Center and look at the space shuttle engines and notice that they're actually made of little veins that have been pretty much welded together. What they do is that they pump fuel through the bell of the rocket engine. That fuel is super cold. I think for like SpaceX rocket engines, the fuel is kept at negative 300 degrees. So you got to think, I have a very high temperature exhaust. However, the bell of the engine is continuously being cooled by fuel before it's actually burned in the combustion chamber itself. And that fuel is at negative 300 degrees. Shit's pretty fucking cold. So
Not to mention that space itself is a cold environment.
Yeah, and then there was the issue of, well, how can they get enough fuel because gravity can't do that, and that works by a little thing called turbo pumps. They're really, really, really powerful, and it's like, I don't know, they burn an absurd amount of fuel per second because they can pump a lot of fuel per second. They're not gravity fed. I heard a conspirator said to me one time that, you know, gravity, if gravity were real, it wouldn't be able to force enough fuel into the combustion chamber of the rocket engine. I'm like, yeah, no duh. That's why they're not gravity fed.
Right, and that's also part of why rockets are staged, yeah, because as it burns the fuel, eventually it's not going to have enough thrust to lift the entire rocket, so they have to stage it so that the next stage, its load of fuel will be pushing less weight than what they were originally from the launch pad.
It is more efficient. If you look at the way rocket nozzles are sized, you'll notice that the second stage engine nozzles are a lot bigger than the first stage, which is pretty much designed to operate closer to sea level. I think it's a range between sea level and 15,000 feet. I could be wrong on that. Every rocket company has their own philosophy behind it and their own science behind it, and it seems to work well for every single one of them. So good engineers. But as the rocket gains altitude, smaller engine nozzles will become less efficient. So what happens is that they stage it to a much bigger nozzle, which is more efficient in vacuum. And the reason for that is because of the change in atmospheric pressure. And this will also lead us to discover that, yes, our atmosphere is next to a vacuum, and we can actually see this happening because I film rockets and I film just that.
And Amy is poking me in the ribs in the background. She says she's got some comments for us. Amy, what you got?
Yes, I have some good ones for us tonight. Quiasa says there was that soda cannon vacuum chamber vid, if I recall correctly. Doesn't that already prove everything? A popping can moves inside a vacuum chamber. That's basically the same thing as a rocket in space. And he also says Soviets were all miffed about the U.S., so they declared they were going to stay away from LA-84, sucky times, Reagan suck too. And solid fuel rockets, if I recall correctly, long rod. And then Digital Demonic Davros asks, have the guys heard of the idiot that thinks the ISS lands every night to refuel?
You don't.
I haven't heard that one.
You don't need to refuel the International Space Station. It's not operating on fuel. It's operating on the velocity that it already has. Take a ball, throw it sideways. It's going to curve and it's going to hit the ground. Take that same ball and throw it a little bit harder. It's going to curve and hit the ground, but slightly further away. What if I threw that ball so hard that the curve of its arc matched the curve of the Earth? Now let's also imagine that I'm high enough where I no longer have to deal with atmospheric drag. The ball would always be curving towards Earth, but Earth would always be curving away just as fast. And so it just keeps going around and around and around. This is called an orbit. And because you don't have any atmosphere to slow you down, you stay in orbit. No fuel required.
Like Buzz Lightyear said, it's falling with style.
Pretty much, they're just following and continuously missing the Earth. That's all they're doing. They're just falling. The reason why they're floating is not because there's no gravity up there. There's, if I remember correctly, like 80% the gravity up there as there is down here on the surface. The reason why they're floating is because they're actually falling. They're just in perpetual free fall.
Yeah, it's about 88% at the altitude the International Space Station flies at. From time to time, maybe on once a month or something, they do little burns to boost their orbit back up because there's still some atmosphere even at 250 miles. So they have to adjust their orbit from time to time, but it's not frequent, and they're fairly short burns. In fact, there's some YouTube video where you can see the guys. Demonstrate that the guys inside the space station demonstrate that when the burn is going on. and you can literally watch them accelerate inside that thing. But it's not real fast.
I remember a video where some guy was able to have a camera with a really big lens floating, and when the burn started, you saw the camera instantly move inside the space station.
Right.
And it's like, all right, let's go ahead and put it right back. It would move backwards. Let's go ahead and move it back. It would move backwards. And then as soon as the engine stopped, it would then float in place and not move at all.
Yep.
So
but every orbit decays over time.
Yeah,
but it's a very slow decay.
But it's really slow. Yeah.
The International Space Station is not in perfect vacuum. That is true. So every now and then it needs a reboost. And that is usually done, I think, with the Progress vehicle. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. But every now and then it does need a reboost. But the atmosphere is thin enough where you could have an orbit for a significant period of time. And so they're just in a state of free fall, continuously missing the Earth as they go around.
Yeah. Exactly. It's sitting at a point where the centripetal force matches the gravitational acceleration. Mm-hmm. That's one way to think of it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's you can figure that out, and if you take the equations that are needed, you can also derive Kepler's third law. Interesting how that works. It's almost as if this shit's all connected.
Huh. Imagine that.
A lot of the flirts, they just don't understand the forces at play on a rocket in flight.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, there are now startups that are now fully successful rocket companies. Like the newest one is Rocket Lab. So you got to think, if space was indeed fake and nothing could ever get into space or stay there and blah, 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 these guys would be pissed because they would have lost a lot of money.
Yeah. I don't see anybody investing multiple billions of dollars in something that's fake.
Not only that, but imagine all these people who go to school, get their education, learn orbital mechanics and all the complicated math that's behind it, and then only to go to their interview at NASA, go, hey, all this stuff that you learned in school, yeah, that's all nonsense. You're gonna have to take this computer program and learn how to make CGI. I would be pissed.
Oh, tell me about it.
So they're either going to have to make sure I die mysteriously in a car crash, or they're going to have to deal with me spewing their dirty laundry all over the internet through Twitter.
Holy mackerel. One thing that... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just looking at the live chat, and sorry, Amy, but I'm about to do a bit of your job. John Rapp was just commenting about our guests' names Red and Blue, and wants to know why I couldn't find someone named White to be on the show as well.
Because diversity.
Yeah.
I thought it was fortuitous myself.
I thought so
hadn't
too.
even thought of that until he said that. It just tickled my funny bone. But anyway, Newton's right. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Things at rest or in motion will stay in their current states until acted upon by another opposing force. Duh.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That doesn't seem complicated.
You can also see evidence of rockets demonstrably working in space because they demonstrate that they're actually in a vacuum. 2 months ago, I filmed an Atlas V 551, which is the AEH F5 mission. And this was a launch where it was early morning. And so you could actually see the rocket gases, the gases that were coming out of the rocket being illuminated by the sun. Now, as atmospheric pressure decreases, the gases will start expanding more and more and more. So that's indicative of two things. One, lower atmospheric pressure, and two, higher altitude, because higher altitude equals lower atmospheric pressure. So as the rocket was gaining altitude, you can see this on video, and they can't say I CGI'd this because I live streamed it. You can actually see the gases expand more and more and more. And guess what? It didn't stop. It kept going. So it was still producing thrust, even though atmospheric pressure was going down to the point where the gases were expanded so wide you couldn't even see the gases anymore. It was in a vacuum. And yet it was still going. So once again, this video is on my channel, and also a user by name of Astronomy Live was able to film it himself as well. We have 2 amateur videographers that were able to capture this event, and I was able to live stream it and then upload the 4K version of that footage. This isn't fake. This is something that not only I saw, but many people saw. So yeah, deal with it. Rockets work in space. The rockets work in a vacuum. They've already demonstrated this.
Yeah, I watched those videos on your channel, Reds. They were amazing. I did watch a conspiracy theorist 2 or 3 months ago. Was watching a film of, I think it was the Raptor engine test by SpaceX, and he was complaining that the flame of the rocket wasn't disturbing the dust cloud that it kicked up when it left the launch pad. I could say quite a bit about it myself, but I figured I'll let the experts talk about that, since they can probably speak more intelligently than I can about it.
Well, I don't know the exact video that he's referring to. The only test I've seen of the Raptor engine was the Star Hopper test, and then the side engine mount test, which was filmed at night. However, for the Star Hopper test, I do remember the dust that it kicked up. Once Star Hopper reaches a certain altitude, it's going to hardly kick up any dust at all, because it's at that certain altitude where it's far enough away from the ground. And then as soon as it gets closer to the ground, the thrust is reduced, i.e. that's why it's currently losing altitude at that specific moment in time. So it's not going to kick up as much dust as what it did when it initially took off. But also, I just want to make this clear. Most of that stuff isn't dust. Most of that stuff is steam, because the launch pad has to be hosed down with water to prevent damage. It's a sort of it's a protective layer on the foundation, and it also acts as a sound suppressor. And when you're blasting it with all this heat energy, it flashes to steam. Now, the landing zone, I don't believe had that, water suppression system. It was just a landing pad, kind of like what we have at LZ1 and LZ2 at Cape Canaveral, Florida. It's just a pad of concrete. So no shit, you're going to see differences when it comes to how much of a cloud is made between launch and landing of the Star Hopper rocket.
Yeah, and I don't understand why he was complaining about it anyway, because it was billowing out 20, 30, 40 feet away from the launch pad. But all the kinetic energy from the jet flame was pointing directly down. Why would he or anybody assume that should be disturbing this particle cloud 20 feet away?
I don't want to pay attention to the Star Hopper that's currently floating in the sky. I want to pay attention to dust. Seems legit.
Yeah.
Seems legit. It almost sounds to me that, and tell me if you guys are getting this vibe, that they're grasping at straws.
Oh, seriously.
Definitely. I've kind of thought that way before I even started my own channel.
So I'm not crazy. Interesting.
No, you're not.
That's why on my channel
advanced.
it's more light comedy, because I can't take them seriously. But
Wow.
we started this channel in this discussion format because Jeff and I decided that some of these claims need to be addressed more intelligently by the experts, because there's so many people out there that's asking questions and are in danger of falling down that rabbit hole. We figured we can't help the people already in that gravity well. We can help the people that are orbiting it, at least.
Well, how many times have you heard that same sort of complaint about the Apollo missions, and they can't see the crater under the lunar landers? which is just nonsense. If you actually look at the damn photographs, you can see the radial lines where moon dust was blasted away.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing they got to keep in mind is that gas is doing everything it can do to expand. That's the reason there's a nozzle on the bottom of the fucking engine.
Yeah.
That's what that's doing. And the minute the gas gets outside that nozzle, it immediately wants to expand as much as it can, as fast as it can. And that means its velocity is decreasing. So you don't need to get too far away from it, and you're down to velocities that are a lot more reasonable and a lot less disturbing to elements that might be, in the vicinity.
What they also failed to mention is that lunar regolith becomes increasingly hard and dense just a few inches below the surface.
Absolutely.
So, and also there were, I believe, 4-foot contact probes on the bottom of the foot pads. And so as soon as those contact probes hit, that's when you would get contact light. So you actually hear, I don't know if it was Buzz Aldrin or I think it was Buzz. I think Buzz was the one that said contact light. That was the landing probes touching it. And so they cut the engines immediately. And then the engine wouldn't be operating at full power. It would just be residual fuel burning off. That's it. So what was there really to blow around when the lunar regolith gets so dense and compact just a few inches below the surface, and then the engines are cut before the landing even occurs? It literally kind of fell from 4 feet onto the surface of the moon.
Yeah, exactly. And those probes were 6 feet, and they actually, I don't know how many of the missions used the automatic feature, but they had an automatic mode that they could be in, where as soon as it touched, it automatically cut the engines off.
Yep. And in some of those images of the Apollo program landings, you can actually see the contact probes bent upward and like all mangled underneath the foot pads of the lunar lander.
Yeah, because it doesn't penetrate this. What's under there, just as you said, a few centimeters of dust is sitting on top of a very hard crust.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so you can actually see evidence of that because it literally bends the contact probes up and outward. So it shows you just how dense of a surface the lunar surface actually is. It's the lunar regolith is loose and that will get blown away fairly easily, but just underneath that is very dense and compact material. It's not going to blow away very easily, especially when you consider that the engines get cut before touchdown even occurs.
Yeah, it's not like they landed in a 10-foot thick layer of Bisquick, for God's sakes. It was just a little, thin layer of dusty stuff.
They thought that they were landing in a sandbox.
Yeah, it's like talcum powder almost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very light. And another thing that really gets me is when they make their argument, they seem to equate the lunar lander as having the same force of upon landing as the entire Saturn V rocket. I mean, we're talking about a small craft with a relatively small mass that really does not need a lot of braking thrust to land.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, you are telling Flurfs to understand scale, which, by the way, have you met them?
Unfortunately, yes. And I've heard these idiots make the same comment about when the lunar lander lifted off from the moon. Why didn't it kick up dust? Well, dummies, it's because it was actually 2 spacecrafts in one, and the bottom half became the launch pad.
Yep.
Exactly. And those are things they just forget to mention conveniently because it supports their narrative.
Yeah, I think it's time we check in with Amy and see what's going on in the live chat. Amy, what do we got going on?
We actually have a couple good comments. We have one from Digital Demonic Davros. He says, the idiots think rocket engines create wind. And James Collins says he's loving this stream, and he's a new subscriber, so thank you. And
Thank you.
Dorian Booker says, yes, thank you. And Dorian Booker says, even my 12-year-old daughter face palms when she hears conspiratards speak about stuff like this. Even kids know better.
Yeah, I was really
That's
hoping
what
that
these are
our
things.
live chat would be having a lot of questions for our guests, but I'm looking through the names of our live chat and I recognize a good majority of them, and these are really intelligent individuals. No, they know as much about rocketry or more than we all do probably, but still, love your comments, guys. Keep them coming.
Absolutely. One thing that I would like to bring up, and I'd like to direct this first to Big Blue. I've been hearing stories of the rocket engines on the SpaceX rockets versus the old Apollo mission rocket to Saturn V's. They seem to believe that going to space with a payload is impossible because the rocket engines aren't big enough, and they don't seem to understand that there's a relationship between the mass of the rocket and the engines that are on that rocket that are going to get it up into space, and that not all of that rocket's going to end up in orbit.
Well, the fact is, and Riz, correct me if I misspeak here, but I believe you find that about 90% of the mass of the rocket is the fuel itself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well.
And so the delicate balance is making the engines produce just enough thrust at when it's initially ignited to lift the rocket off, but it's burning fuel at a furious rate at that point. And the more the thrust is constant, the amount of thrust the engines produce is constant, but the mass of the rocket is continually decreasing because you're burning all that fuel, and that's where the thrust is coming from. You're ejecting the mass of the fuel out the nozzle. That's the bowling ball you were throwing, or the medicine ball you were throwing, right? It's the mass of fuel leaving it. No single engine obviously was anywhere near large enough to handle a Saturn V. It took 5 of the damn things.
That's right. And they were huge.
The biggest single engines ever built. To this day, I think the F1 was still the biggest engine, wasn't it, Riz?
It's the biggest single chamber rocket engine ever built. Yes.
Yeah. How many engines are on the new SpaceX BFR? I can't quite remember.
I think it's 37.
Jesus.
The Falcon Heavy has 27 engines.
Well,
But they've got
27.
quite a significant.
Yeah, well, they're following the same logic as the Russians, because there's a problem with fluid dynamics by making the engines continuously bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know who said it, but one person who rode the Saturn V to space said it was like riding a pogo stick to space. And so they literally have these gigantic spheres on the side of the engine that they call, and I'm not joking, they're called pogo suppressors. And the bigger the engine, the worse the pogoing, I guess, occurs. So in order to combat that, the way the Russians went against that problem is simply making their engines smaller, but making more of them. So you look at the Soyuz and you see that there's a lot of engine nozzles. Just look it up. Look at Soyuz rockets and you'll see there's a lot of them. And I think SpaceX is following the same philosophy. Why make one really big engine that requires a lot of R&D where you can just bolt on a bunch of little engines that don't require as much R&D and are probably cheaper to manufacture?
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. And
So,
I
a
gotta
lot
really
of-
hand it to the guys in the early days of the space race back in the 50s and early 60s who were inventing this stuff from the ground up. The rocket engineers and scientists that we got today are standing literally on the shoulders of giants as they come up with newer and better engines. But yeah, I get really irritated when I see some of these conspiracy theorists try to show some of the early rocket launches that got a few feet off the ground before exploding, as if that's proof of anything other than we're learning from our mistakes. And there is a huge learning curve when you're inventing this stuff for the first time.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
They says here, 50 years ago, solving the problem of the pogo effect. So it was actually called the pogo effect. During the last 10 seconds of the first stage burn, the rocket would experience longitudinal oscillations called the pogo effect. Pogo occurred when a partial vacuum in the fuel and oxidizer feed line reached the engine's firing chamber, causing the engines to literally skip.
Yeah, kind of like a sputter.
So yeah, and the bigger the engine, the worse that effect becomes. So SpaceX, in order to get around that problem, just said, no, we're just going to make a bunch of tiny ones. I think
Yeah.
the Raptor engine is the biggest engine they've ever made to date, tested
Yes.
or otherwise.
Sounds like on the Saturn V, if they had a loose filling, that sucker was going to pop out.
Exactly. But but keep this in mind, people. The main reason that the Saturn V was so awesome is not just because of the amazing engineers that were working on it. It was also because there was a lot of motivation to prove to the Russians that our junk was bigger than theirs.
Gotcha.
And once again, Amy's poking me in the ribs, and she doesn't seem to understand that I bruise easily. I'm an old man. So, Amy, go ahead. What's going on in the live chat?
Okay. John Rapp says the moon and Earth's atmosphere, so rockets do have something to push on, ergo the moon landing absolutely could have happened. Flurf, logic, and reason. Taddy Bogle has a question for the panel. How far have we come since the first space flight's taken? The real non sequitur has a question. How much longer will the ISS be in use? And then C4 asks both Blue Marble Science and Rhetoric, if you could visit any planet, what would it be?
Saturn.
That would be cool.
I would visit Saturn because just look at it. I mean, if there is a God, he loved it so much he put a ring on it.
Yeah.
That would be an awesome place, but I would like to go somewhere I could land. So I guess I would pick Mars.
Cool.
Yeah, I was thinking Mars. If I were younger, I would love to be in the first Mars colony.
And it's a lot
Actually,
shorter trip too.
Yeah, there's a good point made up.
Y'all can hang out at Mars all you want. I'm going to Enceladus.
Cool.
Yeah,
man.
you can land there too, right?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Addressing the question that came from Daddy Bogle, how the advances we've made since the original space program. I think one of the biggest arguments that really bothers me the most is how conspirators claim that all of that in the 60s was fake because with all of our advanced technologies today, we can't go to the moon. Could you guys kind of expand on just how wrong that is?
Well, it's not that we can't go to the moon; is that there isn't the same political drive that there was back in the 50s and 60s. See, the thing is that we were currently in one of the biggest dick measuring contests on the face of the planet in its entire history. You have never seen a dick measuring contest bigger. So it was the space race. And so the government dumped a lot of money into this to make, the moon landings happen and to get there first. We wanted to be the first one, America, USA type of thing. But ever since then, the budget has continuously been cutting it more and more and more to the point where I think NASA gets half a penny for every dollar the U.S. government spends. And for that amount, we get a window to the universe. But we do not have enough to do all the things we want to do. R&D is hard. It is expensive. Not only that, but you have to incorporate new technologies that are not only going to make your job a hell of a lot easier when you're actually in flight, but it's also going to make it more beneficial because you will get more data out of the flight. You will be able to utilize, a more compact, more robust framework in order to meet mission objectives because of the advancements in technology. But unfortunately, you need to test it first. Back in 2014, on the Delta IV Heavy was the EFT-1 launch of the Orion spacecraft. The only way they could test the certain systems was to fly it in space, because such technology has never flown in space before. And you need to make sure that your ship works before you put people in that thing. And you also have to make sure it's not going to absolutely screw itself on reentry. So once again, you have to go to space and you have to experience reentry. And you have to make sure that the equipment can survive reentry as well. The radiation effects that's there. Because even on the space station, they can cause mischief such as locking up laptops and such. If you have mission critical components that are digitally based like that, the same as laptops, you need to make sure that they're shielded properly. That requires money and R&D, and there just isn't enough of it to go around. So they're having to share with other projects, and that's why missions take 10, 15 years to do and then eventually launch.
Exactly. The equipment, although the technology is much more advanced, it's also a lot more sensitive to the conditions of space.
Well, and the durations of the missions that are planned are substantially longer than what we were looking at in the 1960s for a trip to the moon. That was a maximum 14-day mission. Most of them lasted in the range, I think, of 10 or 11 days, something like that. When you start talking about sending people to Mars, now they're going to be exposed to the environment of space and the radiation that's out there, not for a few days, but for literally months or maybe years.
I believe that the shortest possible duration would be 2 years. So you're going to have to deal with the environment of space and then Mars for 2 years. Not only that, but you got to get enough fuel there and enough fuel to get back. And you have to take your food with you and your oxygen. You have to take all the equipment that you're going to need. And if something goes wrong, you're going to need to fix that yourself. So you're going to have the equipment needed to fix whatever is wrong. So this is where they started testing, what if we use the Martian soil as a base for 3D printing? What if we could 3D print parts off the Martian soil so we can decrease our mass and thus saving money? But even that costs money to test. All of this stuff comes back to one thing: R&D and the money that is available to fund the R&D. Back in the 50s and 60s, like I said, America was so giddy about their dick measuring contest with the Russians. We don't have that type of drive anymore. I'm sorry. Right now in Washington, people don't give a damn about it. I'm more concerned about the next, tweet that Trump decides to make.
Yeah, exactly.
I was
back in the 60s, NASA had like 20% of the national budget.
Yeah, now
it wasn't that much. I think it was about 4%, something like that. But I was a 7-year-old kid in 1957, but I remember Sputnik vividly. I actually saw it with my own 2 eyes. You could see that damn thing, and it threw the U.S. into a total panic. That was an enormous "oh shit" moment when we realized that the damn Russians had something up there flying over the top of us, and we couldn't shoot it down.
Yeah, NASA's budget as percent of the federal budget, back in 1958, it was 1/10 of 1%. But a few years later, like 7 or 8 years later, it ballooned to 4.5% of the national budget. And in 2015, that's sunk again to under 1%. You're talking 0.6% of the national budget. So it went from 4.5% down to 0.6%.
Yeah, it's talking about the NASA budget put me in mind of a flat Earth comment thread that I was reading a couple of days ago, where they were complaining about the types of houses and cars that are owned by these NASA scientists. And the first thing I thought of is, not only what you were talking about with the percent of the national budget was, why would anybody go through the course of study that those men and women have to go through without it being in the back of their mind, how much am I going to make? Why do these morons think these people should be making minimum wage or $15 an hour, the same as if you can go to be working at Walmart? No. If your doctor was going to college to be a doctor, I'm guaranteeing you he's thinking in the back of his mind, how much is this going to pay me? Because if he wasn't making some dime, he isn't going to put that that kind of effort to learn to be a doctor, to learn to be a rocket scientist, for crying out loud. That's ridiculous. I think that's one of those arguments that those idiots make because, well, they're losers and they're jealous of people who aren't.
Well, I actually do see their point. So all they have to do really is put their money where their mouth is. Go ahead and invest years of your life getting your education. Go ahead and devote all of your cognitive abilities to this one focus of understanding this shit, which again is no easy task. And then when you go in for your interview, say that you want the same wage as a guy who works at McDonald's.
Exactly. I think that's one of the arguments.
Do it. Put your money where your mouth is. Do it. Do it. No, I'm dead serious. Do it.
Yep, I agree.
I sometimes wonder what they think, where they think the money actually goes.
Well, they actually don't think about that at all because they keep making those stupid claims. Oh, NASA gets $56 million a day. Well, do you have any idea what their daily operating costs are just to maintain their facilities and pay their people?
Okay.
Not much left for a space program.
Have you ever seen a building anywhere on the planet that says NASA Rocket Shop?
Not me.
How many rocket engines do you think NASA actually built in a NASA facility? About none. How many Apollo spacecraft? How much of that do you think NASA actually built? None of it. All of this stuff gets built by private contractors
who need to be paid.
That money ends up right back in our economy. It's not like it's just been frittered away, and the rest of the U.S. doesn't derive any benefit from it. Bullshit.
I think it was Grumman that built the lunar landing module,
exactly.
And it was Northrop that was building some of the combustion parts of the Saturn V. I don't remember all who built what, but they were private contracting companies, aerospace engineers, Boeings and whatnot, Lockheed.
NASA themselves built almost nothing. I think it was MIT that built the flight computers.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of private companies that are, now what they're doing is they're going full blown private with SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, and Rocket Lab. These are private companies and they are not doing this for free. Not only do they need to pay for their own R&D costs, but they need to pay for the rocket, the facilities, and the people that operate them to make sure that your payload, which you also spent a lot of money on, actually makes it to its destination in one piece.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because how good of a business model is it where, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start a rocket company, but I'm not going to dedicate the funds needed to make sure that my shit's reliable. Nobody is going to take you seriously. No one in their right mind is going to trust their payload to your rocket, which is based on some half-assed technology. You got to do better than that. And that's exactly what Rocket Lab and SpaceX are doing. So sometimes they launch their rockets with absolutely, no payload that's worth a damn. The only reason that SpaceX launched their Tesla into a sun-centered orbit was because it was a dummy payload. They needed something to simulate the mass of an actual payload. So because Elon Musk is rich, he just said, fuck it, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Tesla for that. But the reason why they used a Tesla is because no one was stupid enough to trust the first ever flight of a Falcon Heavy with their own payloads. No, I actually want to make sure that this thing proves it can do what it actually has to do before I put my payload on it. I want some guarantees. Yeah. And guess what? That costs money. That's research and development. That is literally launching an entire rocket for a test.
I thought that was a pretty cool idea, sending the Tesla up there. I mean, the choice is either that or a load of concrete blocks, I guess.
Yeah, that or bags of sand.
Bags of sand or something. But I mean, I thought the car idea was pretty neat, really.
When Rocket Lab did it's a test launch, they launched a disco ball to space.
Why not?
Really?
Yeah, they called it the Humanity Star, and astronomers were pissed.
Oh no, that.
I can imagine why. But I think we need to check in with Amy again. Amy, do we have anything going on in the chat we need to know about?
We actually do. We have some great questions here again. We have James Collins asked, do you all believe we will use the moon as a launch platform for future missions due to less gravity? The real non sequitur says, will the Spike engine ever beat the Bell engine? And then we also have a question, given the reduction in budget, do you think another space agency, for example, ESA or JAXA, will overtake NASA as the foremost space agency? And then ask them, Cheshire Vic asks how much rocket stuff gets built in Canada. And there was another question that needed to be addressed. And how much longer will the ISS be in use?
I think the mission has been extended to 2028, although it's likely to be extended even more. But eventually it will be deorbited, and it will no longer be a functioning station after that because it will have disintegrated in the atmosphere. But I think it's been extended to 2028. As of right now, I don't believe there is a plan for a replacement space station. It might just be the case that they decided, you know what, screw it. We're not going to deorbit this thing. We're going to keep it till 2032. I heard that it might be extended to. So it just depends on what the political, I guess, front decides.
Yeah, and as far as using the moon as a launch station, I think that's a very viable idea, but I don't believe I'll ever see it in my lifetime. Possibly in my grandchildren's lifetime, they will live to see that, but I won't.
Yep, you have no atmosphere to deal with and 1/3 the gravity, so it's a lot easier to launch from the moon.
Yeah, absolutely.
It took an entire Saturn V to get from the Earth to the moon, and it took that little tiny capsule, just to get into low lunar orbit. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good energy savings right there.
Absolutely. And speaking of savings, the fact that SpaceX is actually developing the reusable rocket technology, they've been using it for a while now, quite successfully. I wanted to ask you, Reds, what's the average reusable life on those engines? How often can they be reused?
I believe they're still testing that, and they keep those figures close to the chest. But I've seen rockets go like 3 times. So every single time that you launch a rocket and you reuse it, you're adding heat stress to the entire system. That heat stress compromises reliability. And so what you want to do is you want to use it to no greater than what you believe is reasonable in terms of reliability. So they said, listen, our rockets are reliable for 6 uses, 6 repeated uses. Okay, we're going to use it for 3 only. Because if I am reliable to 6, I want to make sure that my customers have that guarantee by saying we will not use our boosters more than 3 times. So now how they determine that is something that I believe is proprietary for each individual company. But I do know that they always cut it short to keep the reliability factor there, to make sure that their customers are cool with them using reusable boosters.
Yeah, and we've been talking about liquid fuel rockets, solid fuel rockets, but we should also mention there's other types of technology for rocket engines as well. I remember back in the mid-90s, they were testing an ion rocket, which, if I'm not mistaken, is still in a solar orbit, and it's currently the fastest moving object in the solar system.
I believe that record was going to go to the Parker Solar Probe. It was launched on the Delta IV Heavy, and it was going to go really, really, really fast, because the closer you get to the sun, the faster you need to go to maintain an orbit above it without crashing into the damn thing, and it's going to go really, really fast. But yeah, if you used an ion engine, they are very low thrust. However, the fuel lasts for a very long time. So it just builds upon itself over and over and over again. Like, yes, I'm only going to accelerate at, let's say, 1 meter per hour or some ridiculously slow amount like that. But the fact that it can keep going and going and keep the engine running for days, weeks, months, even years, it just builds upon itself. Next thing you know, it's traveling many times faster than a bullet, and it can do that without, these awesome gravity assists like what we saw happen with like New Horizons, when it required a speed boost from the planet Jupiter.
Yeah, and I was also reading a while back that they've been working on a hybrid engine that works on the plasma, I think it is.
There's a few different fuels that are currently being tested. There's even a massless engine that's being tested, which, by the way, is complete nonsense, but let them have their fun, I guess.
But in the end, it all comes down to the thermal properties of the engine.
With the engines that are currently in use, the smaller the engine, the easier it is to manufacture and maintain. And they run on the same principle as the bigger engines, but they require a hell of a lot less cooling. And also the thrust that is produced is a lot less than that of the really big engines to get off of the surface of the Earth. In space, you're not dealing with the Earth's gravity well. You only need to use enough thrust for maneuvering. And so the amount of energy it needed is significantly reduced, which means the amount of heat energy that is being transferred to the system as a whole is greatly reduced. And then you have the passive cooling and the cooling through the passive cooling into the fuel that's actually needed to get the thing going in the first place. It cools the engine in real time. It's a neat trick. I love that. It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it is.
The one thing the aerospace guys are really good at, and have been really good at for a long, long time, is the field of reliability analysis. You can make a career out of doing that. There's a mil spec HDBK 217C that I'm pretty familiar with that will give you a method of calculating mean time to failure, mean time between failures, probability of next instantaneous failure, all that kind of stuff. And it's done for any kind of mission critical apparatus, and primarily was intended to look at electronic systems, and that's what I used it for. But and had to do a bunch of those things back in a previous life. But that's the reason. They're telling you, okay, we think the mean time to failure is 6 launches. Therefore, we're going to do 3 and call it a day. And they did that all the time, and still do that all the time with electronics on in aircraft. It reaches that point, and it's still working perfectly fine. They pull it out and put a new one in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Even in
there
civilian aviation, they do that.
Yeah.
There was another one where it was how many aerospace companies are in Canada, and I don't know if this counts, but there's Boeing Canada, and Boeing Canada is responsible for a lot of the major software and the computers that are going to be on the Boeing Starliner, which is going to be a spacecraft that's going to be shuttling astronauts from American soil to the International Space Station, which means we're finally going to ditch our reliance on the Russian Soyuz. And the work that's being done will mean that we can launch people from U.S. soil next year from Cape Canaveral. In fact, in December 17th this year, we're actually going to be doing a test launch of the Starliner, and it will be docking with the space station.
Awesome.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then, of course, Canada has been, involved in the International Space Station for quite some time. In fact, I recently found out about this, which I thought was absolutely amazing. On the back of the Canadian $5 bill, you actually see Canadarm2, the arm that helped assemble the space station, capture the Dragon, captures orbital ATK progress vehicles. It's nice to show that they actually give a damn about space by putting it on their money.
Absolutely. You had something logical?
Oh, yeah. I was just alerted by Amy that she has a few more comments and questions that she wants to bring to our attention. Amy?
Yes, please. John Rapp says, got to give the Russians credit. Sputnik, like Gagarin, Alexei Leonov, rest in peace, Valentina Tereshkova. But U.S. got to the moon first. Many have done good stuff. Ugly German Truth said they also could have simply used the necessary weight simulating a payload launch in water. And then he says, Casual Spaceman had a stream with the press conference for the end of the Starhopper launch, and it sounded as if they calculate for at least 40 or so launches per rocket each, at least long term, as the numbers of launches or payloads started per year do not make any sense otherwise. And James Collins says NASA needs to hurry up with that warp engine. And C4 asks, which type of rocket they would want to ride to get into space, or would it matter because they're taking a rocket into space? And then Digital Demonic Davros says New Horizons actually would be the quickest to reach the Oort cloud.
Yes. New Horizons is going really, really, really fast. So New Horizons was a craft that only weighed 1,000 pounds, and it was launched on the Atlas V 551, which is the Mac daddy of all Atlas vehicles. So it had a not 1, not 2, not 3, not even 4, but 5 solid rocket boosters, an RD-180 engine, which is a twin nozzle Russian engine, an upper stage Centaur engine, and then it had another solid rocket booster, which was a kicker stage, and then it used a gravity assist from Jupiter. It was broken. To put this into perspective, I believe it only took 9 hours to fly past the orbit of the moon.
What was the all-up weight of that thing on the pad? Do you remember, Reds?
I don't know exactly, but I know that as of I think that is the fastest launch ever. Not the most powerful, but most definitely the fastest, because it went right into solar escape velocity. It was not messing around. It's like, nope, I'm going to take all the rockets to fire this 1,000-pound payload towards Pluto as fast as possible. In fact, after it did its gravity assist at Jupiter, it literally shaved off 2 years to its destination. It shaved off 2 years of time it would have to travel to Pluto. It's amazing.
Awesome.
I knew that picked up a lot of speed with that gravity assist. I didn't realize it was that much. Wow.
Yep, they saved 2 years of time doing it that way.
And I also noticed that Demonic Davros had asked us if we knew that South Australia was building a space station or space launch station.
I know that there's one other space station that is either in the works or already exists, but I would be lying to you if I said I follow it very well, and that would be the Chinese. I think the Chinese are the only other nation that has a space station or has one that's currently in development. Like I said, I would be lying to you if I said I followed the Chinese space program, because personally, I don't really give a damn. Murica, but. Yeah, I think the Chinese would be the only other people that you could look at as far as space stations is concerned.
They're catching up pretty fast right now.
Demonic Davros, if you have a link to an article that you'd like to put in the live chat about this South Australia deal, please do so. I'd like to read it.
What kind of rocket would I like to ride? Any of them.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Any of
them.
I'd like to go. I'd like a trip on the BFR.
I would do. I mean, because if I wanted to go to space and, kind of, feel what it was like, I know exactly which one I would do, and that would be STS-121. For the space shuttle, that would be the one that I would want to have a ride on. That particular one, because it was a clear day, you could see it breaking the sound barrier. You could actually see the Mach cone form around the space shuttle. It was such a beautiful launch. In fact, if you type in space shuttle launch in YouTube, it's literally the first video you see. It says space shuttle loud something music not or whatever. Anyway, it has like 25 million views. It's awesome. But that particular launch is the one I would want to ride on.
That's cool. How about you, Logical?
I'm with Big Blue there. Any of them. I would just love to experience space once in my life.
Yeah.
I just want to go up there and laugh at the Earthlings.
Yeah, well, that, and there's the upside that if we go out there, we get away from the flurfs. There's definitely an upside.
There's a bonus in that. Hey.
Amy, do we have anything else going on in the live chat that you want to tell us about?
Actually, I do have some good ones. Ugly German Truth says Elon Musk has twittered for Falcon 9 plans to build at most 90 cores and use them in about 300 launches before switching completely to BFR/Starship. That would be on average 7.5 missions, depending on what about 300 means. 320 would be 8 around. And then John Rapp says, I read a lot in my youth about ram scoops. Is there any research into that anymore?
Ramsey, I believe they're going to what's known as a ramjet engine, which is a good way of using very high velocity air breathing engines to get you most of the way there, and then using rocket engines to propel you the rest of the way. I don't believe that there's any research currently into the viability of whether or not that's a system that could actually work, because that falls into SSTOs, which is single stage to orbit vehicles. Making a single stage to orbit vehicle would require a lot of R&D, way more R&D than probably what was originally spent for the Saturn V. Single stage to orbit vehicles are commonplace in Kerbal Space Program, but making it a reality, I don't think it's feasible in any way, shape, or form. I think you would be better off using a two-stage system at the very least for your space program and rocket engines. Not only that, but single stage to orbit vehicles are inherently inefficient, and if you use a winged aircraft, then they're inherently more dangerous, because winged aircrafts have a bit of an issue when it comes to ejecting the astronauts to safety. You have to design a system around it, and it's vastly more complicated than simply putting a launch escape tower at the top of the rocket. Earlier this year, I had filmed the launch escape system for the SLS rocket being tested. That is a far more simple and far more reliable system than whatever you could do with a winged aircraft. That's the reason why I think the space shuttle failed so miserably, when you consider just its track record for safety, because it was inherently a dangerous vehicle. You were strapping solid rocket boosters to a winged aircraft, which once they started, they're not stopping. You're along for the ride, whether you like it or not. And if something goes wrong, there is no oh shit button. You can't eject. And that's something that SpaceX and Boeing have been tasked with making sure exists on their rockets. And I don't think an aircraft-based, space plane can compete with that.
We were talking a little bit earlier before the show. You're in your first year of mechanical engineering studies. Can you tell us a little bit about your future plans?
Future plans are completely open. I just want to do something that's something to do with aerospace, whether it's working for NASA, SpaceX, Sierra Nevada Corporation, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Rocketdyne, whatever company is out there. Basically, I'm all yours, guys. Take me away, rocket company. I'm good to go. I have no loyalty to any one company. To me, they're all doing great stuff. Sierra Nevada Corporation is working on the Dream Chaser. SpaceX is working on BFR, and you also have ULA, which is working on the Vulcan rocket, as well as Blue Origin, which is working on their New Glenn rocket, which is also going to be a landable rocket, and a landable rocket the size of the Saturn V. So there's plenty of opportunity out there. I like keeping my options open, but as of right now, I'm just getting the bare bones basics done. I'm just starting out. I am not anywhere close to finishing, but I'm going to give it my all. And who knows, once I reach orbit, I'll be sure to give you all a phone call.
That would be awesome.
You'll know it's
I'm sure.
because the first two words you'll hear is "suck it."
Well, if you make it to space, Reds, we're definitely going to have to do a live stream with you in orbit. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. And I'm sure all of us wish you the best of luck with that, and we hope it all works out for you, bud.
Yeah, I'll remember you guys will be like, "Oh, hello, peasants. I remember you."
Yeah, well, I remember what it was like to be young and have that whole life ahead of you sort of thing, and I'm not envious of it, because to be honest, I don't think I'd want to go back and do it all over again. But yeah, future plans for guys like me and Jeff these days is just freaking waking up tomorrow morning.
Exactly. And not to mention, we peasants will remember the ugly plumber you used to be.
No. I'll still be ugly by the time I get there. Those space visors that are like really tinted and you can't see into the helmet. I'm gonna have to wear that inside the station.
Oh no! Oh no!
So you're in danger of breaking space? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, my face is a weapon of mass destruction and is illegal in 14 U.S. states, so I imagine so.
Well, at least Creaky Blinder, he only breaks the internet from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Big Blue, you're retired from a lifetime in mechanical engineering. Have you got any advice for Reds?
It was actually more electrical than that's what I trained for, but ended up doing a lot of mechanical and structural stuff. Do I have any advice? Yes, don't. Do something else.
Oh no, sorry, Red.
Stop now while it's not too late. No, it's a lot of fun. It really is a rewarding field of endeavor. And if you're lucky, you get to do some some of the stuff I got to do, which is, play around with some actual science, do some research and development work. That was always a fun thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely it's nice to think of the future and think about going to space, because that would be so awesome.
Just
But
to have any kind of part in it.
Yeah, I will give you one piece of bad news though, Reds. I know you probably have your heart set on this, but the scientific method is nothing like Anthony Riley says it is.
Oh, well, that's a damn shame.
It doesn't really work. I know that's going to hurt, but try to suffer through it. It really doesn't work.
You mean I just can't pull random shit out of my ass and expect it to work?
No.
And
I'll tell you something else that'll break your heart. Not one time in 45 years did anybody ever come to me and say, "What is your fucking independent variable?" Nobody. Not once.
Yeah.
So you go to all the trouble to learn that bullshit, and then nobody ever asks you.
Damn.
Yeah.
can't wait. This is going to be awesome, but that's okay. Listen, my goal is simple. Learn all the stuff I need to know, learn the complex math, the methodology behind, the science that goes into making space work, and then, make sure that I have the base and the know-how to make it to orbit in one way or another. And all that will be for the singular purpose of telling everyone on Earth to get bent.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in that endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Be like, hi, this is Rhetoric from Orbit. Yes, that's right. Get bent. I know you're jealous right now. Let's go ahead and have a moment of silence for 30 seconds while you guys stew in your jealousy. And then you wait for 30 seconds and like, by the way, this is the Earth. Notice how it's round.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. Can't wait.
So, Amy, is there anything going on in the live chat that you want to bring to our attention?
Absolutely, yes. I have Digital Demonic Davro says, logic and reason, getting smarter every time you guys stream. Tell Reds I am jealous of his location to rocket launches. And so thank you for that. And John Rapp says he meant ram scoops in space collecting interstellar hydrogen as you go. I'm not sure what exactly all that means, but I'm sure somebody does.
Hydrogen is a good fuel, but it has a tendency to rise. A good example of this would be the Delta rockets. The Delta rocket is a hydrogen-based rocket where it quite literally sets itself on fire before it takes off. I'm not joking. Look up any Delta 4 or Delta 4 Heavy, preferably Delta 4 Heavy launch, like NROL 71, I believe it was. The rocket literally sets itself on fire. That is a boss rocket right there. I'm going to set myself on fire, and I'm still going to make it to space. Get bent. I love that. But yes, hydrogen. If you're able to get a hydrogen from the environment that you're in, you can cut down on the amount of fuel that you actually need to take with you. There's a concept called Mars Semi-Direct, where you can actually make most of the rocket fuel you need from the Martian atmosphere. You don't need to take all of the fuel with you. You just need to take 10% of it with you, and the other 90% can be made right there. Same concept. Get the fuel from your environment. You don't have to take it with you. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy. At least that's the theory.
Is there any reason why you couldn't use hydrogen in an ion drive? I can't think.
Hydrogen is kind of likes to Hindenburg everything, unfortunately. So it is kind of gnarly to work with. So people try to avoid it when possible.
Well, yes. If you got some oxygen around, it's pretty fond of getting together with oxygen.
And also, did I mention that the Delta 4 Heavy literally sets itself on fire before it takes off? That is due to the hydrogen, my friend.
Oh,
When the hydrogen starts rising and the fire follows it, it sets the entire rocket on fire, and then it still takes off.
That
I'm
is
kind of
amazing.
wondering about that comment from Demonic Dabros. Does he mean the stream is getting smarter, he's getting smarter, or we are getting smarter? Because I got news for you, Demonic. I am not any smarter today than I was yesterday.
I'm just some guy on the internet that talks to morons who think the Earth is flat. You know, everything is relative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is that. But hey, I
Yeah.
retired from a job where I talked to people who had really weird ideas, only to create a hobby for myself in my retirement where I talk to people who have weird ideas.
And my days are spent teaching kids about science, and they're more interested in the latest Pokemon craze.
Yeah. When Riz was talking about his plans, I was remembering when I was a little boy during the space race and I got to watch the Apollo 11 moon landing. All the little boys, including myself in our neighborhood, we all wanted to be astronauts, but nobody bothered to tell us that early on that you better be really good at the maths, and I wasn't, so I ended up being a shrink instead, and I'm like, yeah, man.
I go back to the same Pokemon craze, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and look at Pokemon on our smartphone instead of actually, spending a lot of time in school learning this stuff, so we can have humanity progress a little bit more. Very, important to our species development. Team Mystic represent, by the way, will bathe in the blood of our enemies.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I don't know how long have we been on here? It's about an hour and a half. Yeah,
Yes.
I think we've been kind of beating this horse bloody, and I know
I think
Reds did not intend to stay on the stream quite this long, so I think we've kind of gotten to the point. Unless Amy has other questions or comments from the gallery, that we can start moving toward a wrap up. What do you guys think?
I think so.
I'm sleepy.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah. There was just one comment. It was just a clarification. It's called the Bussard ramjet. I guess it's still a concept. That's what Sean Carroll says. Just to clarify what we were trying to talk about earlier.
I think I've heard of that before. I could be wrong on this, but it is a ramjet that uses the oxygen from the atmosphere up to a certain point, and then it uses its own onboard oxygen to carry it the rest of the way to orbit. It is a great concept if that is what he is referring to. However, that again follows the SSTO issues and also the issues dealing with winged aircraft, because it is going to have to go on a winged aircraft. There are inherent risks, and it makes the entire system a lot more complicated. And the more complicated you make a system, the more prone it is to failure. And what you want to do is you want to make your rockets simple. Simple equals better. The traditional two-stage rocket design is a system that is proven. It works, and it's easy. Not only that, it's very easy to design a safety system around it that doesn't compromise the rest of the rocket. With winged aircraft, you do have to design a system that can be rather restrictive depending on the design specifications of the entire system as a whole. You have to design a safety system around the plane instead of adapting a safety system to the top of the rocket where all the fire and badassery is already beneath you and out of the way. So it's just a more complicated system. I don't see any future in it, but who knows? I've been wrong before.
Well, the one thing for damn sure you're not going to do is punch out at Mach 10.
Yes. Yes.
That's going to kill you deader than hell. So you've got to have some way to be protected, to protect the people.
The entire capsule that you're sitting in would have to eject, but again, that capsule also has to be a certain shape so that you don't tumble at Mach 10.
Yeah.
And the SpaceX capsule, the Boeing capsules, the Soyuz capsules, they are designed to maintain a certain orientation at very high velocities. Cockpits, like what you find in aircraft, do not have such benefits as the type of geometry that makes one stable at those speeds. So it's inherently risky. While the engine technology is absolutely amazing and can make SSTOs, possible, I still think it is a more complicated system and therefore a more dangerous system. I sure as hell would not want to ride one. I'll watch it from afar. I'll take the Dragon spacecraft. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
See, there's always those little things that you got to think about. So, yeah.
Like not dying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's highly important in my world. But anyway, Blue, what do you got for final thoughts on this whole deal?
Oh, what final thoughts? Well, stop being silly, people. Rockets work the way we're telling you. Take your garden hose and pull the trigger, and that force you feel is the same thing that makes a rocket fly. It takes its oxygen with it. It doesn't need that. We don't have to worry about the fact that space doesn't have any oxygen in it. Gee, what other rambling can I do? That's about it, I guess.
Yeah. Your rambling is more intelligent than most of the flat earthers' deep thoughts. So thank you. Reds, what do you got for a wrap up?
Watching flat earth content has as much intellectual rigor as watching paint dry. Do yourself a favor and educate yourself. Watch channels like, I don't know, Number File, Crash Course, something like that. Educate yourself. Don't go headfirst into these conspiratard nonsense where people are just trying to sell you BS. Just do yourself a favor. Science is fun. And just understand that and do yourself that favor.
Now, it is actually pretty cool being a nerd. Jeff, what about you?
Well, I thought today was an excellent show. I certainly learned a lot, and it's like Red said, educate yourself. That's the best thing you can do. Pick up a book, learn about what you want to know, and don't take it from a flurf because what they're giving you is just crap. That's it.
Yep.
Logic.
Amy, you get any final thoughts?
This was an amazing conversation. Space has always fascinated me since I was a little girl, and so this to me is just really interesting and fascinating. Got to understand a lot more about how things do work. So thank you for that. It's been a good show, and it was, and thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our guests too for coming on with us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're more than welcome.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we'll just get a final thought from our guys in the background. So, Dick Dawson, are you still there? Do you want to have a final word?
Sure, I am indeed. Great episode tonight, guys. Got to thank the guests for coming, Reds and Blue. That was awesome. It's oxygen doesn't just have to be a gas in the atmosphere. It's quite easy to just, turn it into a solid and pack it along for the ride. Not very hard. And, you don't need to have the ground to push off of because otherwise the rocket would just stop working effectively 100 feet in the air. Like, that's just moronic. What the hell are you thinking? So, that was a great attack on it. I loved it. Excellent episode.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
thanks, Dick. And Teddy, how about you?
Oh, no, I'd just like to echo what you have said there. Thank you very much to Reds and Blue Marble, man. Absolutely cracking to have you on. It's been really interesting listening to you. And as for the chat, fantastic question, folks. I love it every time I come on these things. Keep up the good work, folks.
Yep, and if anybody's interested, Greater Sapien put out a really good video today explaining how rockets work in a vacuum. I would encourage everybody to go visit his channel after the show and see what that was all about. I loved it. And I should mention, too, that, yes, we will be having 2 more shows in November, every other week, just as we've been doing all along. But there's going to be a little hitch in the works come November. We don't know exactly our date and time. The reason for that is we've invited Professor Philip Bell. If you're not familiar with his channel, Amy can drop it in the live chat. He is a professor of chemistry and physics at an Australian university and works for the Indian Space Agency and was directly involved with their moon landing attempt. And because of his travel and work schedule, we need to be flexible for him to be able to appear on the show and talk about the things that he wants to talk about. Because of that, Reds may or may not be on with us come November. We'll have to see how that works out, but we will definitely be letting everybody know well in advance what our day and time for November will be, and then more than likely come December, we will be at our regularly scheduled day and time. I hope you join us for that. That's about all I got, and Teddy, take us home.